Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here to do a recent reads update. These are the books that I read over the last couple of weeks since the last time I did a recent reads update, and let's just get to it because I've got, I think, 6 books here to talk about. The first one is a romance novel. This is Love on the Brain by Hazelwood. This, I feel like, has been all over social media and booktube recently. It's a fairly new release by the author of The Love Hypothesis. I read this book with my romance buddy readers, Doris and Katie, and we had read The Love Hypothesis several months ago and really enjoyed it. So this is a contemporary romance. We're following our 2 main characters, B, that's the lady here, and Levi is the gentleman. They are both scientists. They are working on a helmet for astronauts to wear, and B is like a neurobiologist, and Levi is like the engineer person. So they're collaborating to build this helmet that works on this, like with the astronaut's brain while they're in space. And Levi and B knew each other when they were in grad school, and then they did not like each other. So this is like an enemies to lovers type trope romance. And the things that I like about Hazelwood are she has really great dialogue, she has really quirky characters, and both of her books have been set in with scientists. So they're in STEM fields, they're about women in STEM fields, they're about women in science and what that's like and the barriers that are, present today for women who want to participate and actively engage in a science career. So that, of course, is all very interesting to me, and I really like how Hazelwood writes those topics. The thing that I didn't like so much about this one is I felt it was very similar to The Love Hypothesis, to, the 2 heroes, Levi in this book and the hero from the previous book, very, very similar in characters. The handsome, tall, strong, and silent type. And the whole enemies to lovers trope is also quite similar in both books. So yeah, I mean, it just felt very samey that way. And while this was an enjoyable read while I read it, it's not a book that's staying with me. It's been a little over a week since I read this, and I've already, a lot of it has already passed from my memory. So enjoyable time while I read it. Not the best romance novel I've ever read in my life. So if you want something fun and contemporary that talks about women in science, it is a fun read. I then finished Fledgling by Octavia Butler. This is Butler's vampire novel. So this follows the main character, Shori, who wakes up, doesn't know where she is. She appears to be like in a cave of some sort, and she has no idea her origins or what is going on. She seems to be quite injured and has no idea how those injuries occurred. And so then we follow Shori from this moment when she wakes up in this cave, and as she heals and then encounters the rest of the world, and as she starts to learn more about herself. This was a really good read. I really enjoyed this overall. I will say that right from the beginning, I struggled with this to the point where I didn't know if I was going to be able to continue to read it at the beginning, because Shori presents as a 10 or 11-year-old Black girl, and she's not obviously 10 or 11. She's a vampire, and she's like 50 some years old, but she looks like a little girl. But everybody that she interacts with treats her like she is a grown person. So in all the ways that you can imagine that you get treated when you're a grown person. So you have to get your mind around that and realize that Butler is playing with the tropes of the vampire lore and all of that. And yeah, so this book talks a lot, or this book is exploring the themes around racism and what we expect of genders and races and how those things have played into our myths and our mythology. And I find that all interesting. So the thought-provoking aspects of this novel are great. This is not a fast-paced vampire novel by any means. This is a very slow burn vampire novel. And you figure out quite early on that there is somebody hunting Shori and her family, and that's why she was injured. But the resolution to that takes the entire book. And so this is not this is not your typical fast-paced genre vampire novel, so don't go into this looking for that. But if you're interested in how Butler would explore these types of themes, and the science fiction aspect comes into this in the fact that Shori is a genetically modified vampire. That's why she's black. And because vampires were playing with the idea of creating vampires who could withstand the sun by having melanin in their skin. So yeah, interesting concept. I really did end up enjoying this book. I really find Butler's writing to be fantastic. Her themes that she's exploring are always interesting and thought-provoking, but it was really difficult to get over the squick factor of having the main female character presenting as a 10 or 11-year-old black girl. Just gotta say that, because if that is something that you don't think you can get over, I would avoid this book. Okay, and then next, a book that I've been working on all month, This Chunky Devil. This is Salman Rushdie's autobiography, Joseph Anton. This is his memoir of his time after the fatwa was declared, where the death warrant was signed for him, the death threats were received, and how he had to change his life, and how he lived in all those years when folks were after him for his perceived insults to the religion of Islam. So Salman Rushdie can write. He's an excellent, excellent writer. And this memoir was really engaging and really interesting, but it's highly detailed and it's very dense. There's lots of literary references. Rushdie is very well read, and he brings in a lot of literary references into his thinking about the time that he was undergoing, having to be in hiding, having to give up all of his travel and his activities, his normal lifestyle, having to be separated from his family. When the fatwa was declared, he and his wife were already having marital troubles. His wife, Marianne Wiggins, and they stayed together for a little while afterwards, but then got divorced. And so he was separated from his son that he had with Wiggins. And that was very difficult. The other thing that I will say is, while I enjoyed this book, and I think Rushdie is an excellent writer, and I was very interested to see how it was all going to turn out, even though I already know, he lived through those years. But Rushdie is... he's a ladies' man. He's a ladies' man. And in this memoir, he frames it in that he just falls in love. He just falls in love with these ladies. But he doesn't bother to end his ongoing relationships before he starts new relationships. And I struggle with that. I have a real problem with infidelity. I am not tolerant of infidelity. I mean, I can read about it. Obviously, I'm not tolerant. I think it's a terrible thing to do to someone. If you don't want to be with the person you're with, break it off and then start a relationship with someone else. And lots of people got hurt by his behavior. And he professes to be sorry for that, but he continued to do the same thing over and over again. His behavior didn't change. So while I admire his commitment to freedom of speech and the ability of writers to write whatever they want without fear of physical violence, which I agree with 100%, in his personal life, and he's an awesome friend. He's super loyal. He's super kind. He does, if he's your friend, he's your friend for life. And all that's very admirable, but I would not want to be one of his wives or one of his girlfriends. Let's just say that. So, but I am really glad that I read this, and I'm really glad to have now read 2 Rushdie books. And so I feel like now I have a much better idea of his writing style and what he's all about after reading these. The other thing I will say about this was there were bunches of different sections in this book, like paragraphs or sentences, that I recognized from reading his essay collection, Languages of Truth. So this book came out in 2012, and Languages of Truth only came out in the last couple of years. So obviously some language, some text was pulled from this to put into those essays, or he had written those essays previously and that got taken and put into this. So it was a little disconcerting to be reading along. I mean, I've read that before. where did I read that before? And it was in the essay collection. So yeah, so that's just another thing to be aware of, is there is some overlap with some of the writings in those two books. So those are all the physical things that I've finished. I have finished 3 other things, but in digital format. So I read Finding Latinx, In Search of Voices, Redefining Latino Identity by Paola Ramos, which is a collection of essays by a Latinx author. I read this for Latinx Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th. And this was a really excellent collection. Buddy read this with Britta, and we both really enjoyed this book. And I learned a ton from it. There was so much in this that I had no idea. So what the author does is she travels around the United States and she just talks with different Latinx communities about what their experiences are. So you get these stories of all these different folks just living their lives, right? And all the different ways in which Latinos and Latinas live in the world. And there's such a variety. There's so much intersection. It deals with gender and sexuality and, racial identity, all these different ways in which the Latino identity interacts with other types of identities. And it was really, really fascinating. The book also has a lot of factual information about statistics, about where Latinx people are living in the United States. Because, when you think about it, the word immigrant in the United States, a lot of times that just brings to mind an image of a brown face at a fence in Texas or Arizona. And that is not the extent of the Latinx community, obviously. And this book really explores the different groups that exist. There's all of these folks that are from Guatemala. Like the majority of folks who have traveled to the United States and have migrated into the United States over the last few years through Texas and Arizona, the southern border states are from Guatemala and are of Mayan ancestry. Like huge percentage. Like I had no idea because that is not the story we're told in the media. And that's kind of Ramos's point that she's making, is the story that we're told in the media is very reductive. It does not give us the full picture. It does not provide for the complexity of the identities of folks who have come to the United States in search of a better life or to join family or for whatever their reasons are. The other area that was really, really fascinating that I knew very little about was the Afro-Latino population, folks who have African heritage and also Latin American heritage, and how that African heritage has been erased, not only because of racism in the United States, but because of racism in the Latin American countries that they come from. So that was really, really fascinating as well. Lots of stuff about how Latinx folks who have come to the United States are incorporating their ethnic and ancestral cultural backgrounds into their lifestyles, into their communities where they live now in the United States, which just brings diversity and a breadth and a depth of experience that just benefits everyone, I think, in the United States. Like the more diversity and the more different cultural values we bring into the United States, the better for us. We all benefit from that. We benefit from those broad experiences and those broad art, whether it's arts or music or whatever, like that just benefits everyone to have more of that in our country. So it was really great. I will say that my one criticism of this book is it probably could have used some better editing. There was some very clunky writing, like it would kind of throw you out of your reading, and it just was stuff that's could have been caught and addressed by an editor. It wasn't that the information was bad or poorly presented. It was that like just a sentence might just not really read really smoothly or something like that. And I think this is a debut by this author. So, experience will help with that, but also some editing help would have really benefited the book as well. But I definitely do recommend it, particularly if you're interested in learning more about the Latinx experience in the United States. I think it's really, really relevant, and it's really important that we learn more about this section of our population and our society. And then I read a graphic novel for Banned Books Week. I read Genderqueer by Maia, Kobabe, who is a non-binary person and who uses the pronouns air. So this is a graphic novel that I have seen recommended everywhere, and it was something that I was really interested in experiencing for myself. And I just happened to be, I don't even know why I went on Scribd. I went on Scribd to look for something else entirely, and that popped up. And I was like, I wonder what it would be like to look at a graphic novel on a digital device. And so I ended up reading the entire thing on my phone, and it was a great experience. The way that the book was produced made it super easy to read on my phone. And so I was sitting in a parking lot waiting for my daughter at an urgent care and read the whole thing in one sitting, and it was fantastic. And this is Kobabe's autobiography, basically, coming of age type of narrative that explores air experiences determining their own, our own gender, sexuality, and sort of place in the world. And I thought it was really, really well done. It's super informative, and really, I learned a ton from this book. I will say it is quite graphic when it comes to sexual content, not in a gratuitous way at all. It was definitely M's lived experience, but I just think that it might be something like, I would have been embarrassed to have been reading the physical book like on an airplane so that somebody else could see the pictures. But it was fine for me reading it on my phone in my car where there was nobody else around. So I just would say, if that's something that would embarrass you, it would embarrass me. So just be aware of that, and just, it's just not something that I would say that I would just want to be reading in public around people that could see what I was reading. That's just my own personal comfort zone. Your mileage may vary. So excellent to read that. I was really glad to finally check that one off. And I think I'm not all about banned books. Obviously don't support that at all. And so I was glad to have read something that's been so often challenged, particularly in the last few years. I think it's a really important book and a really informative book, and I hope that more people do read it. And then lastly, the most recent audiobooks that I completed was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maia Angelou, which is obviously a modern classic. And I thought I had read this book. So this book falls into the same category as Jane Eyre fell into for me, in that I thought I had read it way back in like probably high school or something. And that I was like, I don't really remember a lot about it. I know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Why don't I listen to it on audiobook? So I did. I started listening to it on audiobook, and it is read by Maia Angelou herself, which is fabulous. And I realized I started listening to it. I'm like, I have no memory of this. I have not read this. So yeah, I had not read it, and I was unaware that I knew it was her autobiography of her childhood growing up, and I knew it contained difficult topics, that she experienced traumatic moments. She, experienced childhood assault. And so I knew that going in. So that wasn't the surprising part. The surprising part for me was I didn't realize what generation she was from. So I didn't realize she grew up during the Depression in the South, and she was raised by her grandmother. Her parents, had split up, and her grandmother raised her and her brother during their earliest childhood. It was fabulous. It was so good, but it was like not at all what it just wasn't anything that I thought it was going to be. And it was so much better than what I thought it was going to be. I mean, I expected it to be good, and it was so much, it even exceeded my expectations for what it was going to be. And Angelou tells her story in a very straightforward way without any, like today's, I think there's a difference between memoirs that were written some time ago versus memoirs that are written today. In memoirs that are written today, you get a lot of exploration of the author's like emotional state or their emotional journeys or their feelings about this, that, or the other thing that's happened to them. And you just don't get any of that from older memoirs. Like I had read Half Breed by Maria Campbell earlier on this year with Sean the Book Maniac, which was a Métis woman's memoir. And again, it just straightforward, like these things happened to me. This is what happened. This is my story. But without any of that, like, you know, and I don't even want to, I'm not trying to say this in a way that people shouldn't expect sympathy for horrible things that happen to them, because obviously you feel bad for people that have horrible things happen to them. But the style of these older memoirs is like just so like lay it out there in front of you without any expectation that you're going to feel any kind of way about it. Like they don't even, the author doesn't themselves don't even express that they feel any kind of way about it. So it's just a different style of writing, and one that resonates really strongly with me. I really respond really well to this style of memoir. And so I just thought it's almost more emotionally heartbreaking to read someone's memoir where they're just telling you what happened without any other, without any, like, what's the word I want? Without any emotional content put on that. Without their emotional content put on that. Like she loves her grandmother, and her grandmother clearly loves her, but there's no, like, her grandmother was not affectionate towards her, was not compassionate towards her, was not a cuddly grandmother at all. And yet you can still recognize and see the strong love and bond between grandmother and granddaughter in the actions towards one another. And that's just a beautiful thing. It's just beautiful. And I thought this memoir was absolutely beautiful. And I definitely want to read more in Maya Angelou's memoir series. At some point, I'm gonna continue on with that. So yeah, those are the 6 books that I have recently read. They're all excellent books. I don't think there was a dud in the bunch, except for, my least favorite one probably out of the bunch was the romance. And I enjoyed that while I was reading it. So it wasn't a bad book by any stretch of the imagination. So a great run of reading there for me. Which is awesome. Hopefully we'll continue on into the future. I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read, and I will talk to you later.